Hey guys, I'm Tammy. Welcome back to Happily Home Cooking. Today we are making a very special Christmas cookie, one that is inspired by a dessert we recently had at Disneyland. So on our recent trip to Disneyland, we went to Galaxy's Edge, and at the milk stand there, they had a seasonal item called a Wookiee Ookiee. It's basically a chocolate cookie that was coated in pecans and then had a caramel filling in the middle. We all really enjoyed it, but these things were massive. Our family of 4 shared just one of these, but they were really tasty and fun, so we thought we would create our own homemade version back at home. Enter the Happily Home Cooking homemade Wookiee Ookiee. I'm gonna walk you through step by step how to make these, and so you can enjoy them at home too. And make sure to stay tuned for our other family favorite recipes, including some more Disneyland-inspired copycat recipes, which we'll have coming soon. Make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button, comment down below if you want to see more of those Disneyland recipes. And here we go, let's make our homemade Wookiee Ookies. So the first thing we need to do is make a chocolate cookie dough for the base of our Wookiee cookies. For this, we are using our go-to double chocolate cookie recipe. We bake these up all the time, just like this. So if you don't even want to bother with the pecans and caramel of the Wookiee Ookies, you can just make these delicious double chocolate cookies. But today, we'll use them as our base for something a little extra special. So for our dough, we'll start with 2 sticks or 1 cup of butter. I've left this to sit out on the counter for about an hour just to let it soften to room temperature. And we'll be creaming our butter with 1 cup of white sugar, and 3/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar. We'll pop on our whisk attachment, and we are going to whisk these together. We're going to cream them together for at least a good 5 minutes or so. We want them to not only combine, but we want them to be really light and fluffy and creamy. I always like to start things on a low speed at first when there's a dry ingredient such as sugar or flour, just so it doesn't fly everywhere. But once they start combining together, we can kick this up to a good medium speed. And we'll just let that go, let it do its thing, and while it is, we will combine our dry ingredients in a separate bowl. So in bowl number 2, we will start with 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. Make sure when you're measuring your flour that you lightly scoop it into the measuring cup and level it off. Unlike the brown sugar, you don't want to pack it in. Now we'll multitask here a little bit as we make these. I'm just going to stop the mixer for just a moment and scrape down the sides just to make sure all of that butter and sugar is all getting creamed and not just the part that's sitting in the middle. So get a rubber spatula, give it a quick scrape down. And then we're back in business. Turn that mixer back on to that medium speed and let it continue creaming. Back over in bowl number 2 with the dry ingredients, we are going to sift some cocoa powder. We are using 1 1/4 cups. Cocoa powder is an ingredient that I do definitely highly recommend you take this extra moment to sift. It does tend to be pretty chunky coming out of the package, I find. And if you get a little nugget of a chunk of cocoa powder, it's not sweet. It's not like finding a melted chocolate chip in your cookie. It's really something you want to be evenly distributed. And real quick, let's hop back over to our mixer and let's give those sides one more scrape down. Again, just to make sure that this is all getting nice and creamy all together. Okay, perfect. On you go, and we will finish our dry ingredients. Last thing we're adding here is 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And then we'll give all of our dry ingredients a gentle mix together. Again, just evenly distributing everything. Alright, so back over in our mixer, our butter and sugars are all nicely creamed together now. You can see the beautiful color. Notice how it's lightened up since we've began. That is exactly what we're looking for. So now we're ready to add in our eggs. We are using 2 eggs. I always like to add them one at a time, mixing it in between each addition. In goes egg number 2. Our son keeps telling me that I need to master the one-handed egg crack, so that's something I am working on. Okay, now once our eggs have both mixed in, before we add in those dry ingredients, let's just give this bowl again one more scrape down, making sure everything is getting well mixed together. And we'll add in some of our dry ingredients, not all of it, maybe half to start with. And again, like I mentioned before, I always like to start this on a low speed at first to make sure we do not have a cloud of cocoa powder and flour. Once it starts mixing in, we can crank it up a little bit. I will also mention that unlike the butter and sugar, we don't want to overmix this. We don't want to let this go for 5 minutes or a long time because then your cookies can become tough. We really want to do just enough to incorporate the flour mixture. So when you're ready, add in the rest of that flour and cocoa powder and baking soda. And we'll mix these in until they are just combined. I'll kick it up to a higher speed just for a second at the end, just to make sure all of that cookie dough that is stuck inside the whisk gets outside and mixed into the bunch. All right, and our last ingredient we are adding to our cookie dough is 2 cups of chocolate chips. Use your favorite kind. We like to use semi-sweet, but you could of course use milk chocolate or even white chocolate if you wanted to. And then we'll kick this mixer back on just for a few seconds, again, just to mix in those chocolate chips. We do not want to over mix our dough. All right, that's good. That's it. Our cookie dough is done. It's all well mixed together, but not over mixed. Just perfect. If you need to, grab yourself a nice strong spoon just to make sure that all of the flour and everything that are along the edges of the bowl are all stirred in. This is quite a stiff dough though, so I don't recommend you do that with your plastic spatula unless you want it to break. All right, so we are good to go. It is time to scoop our cookie dough. I am using a medium-sized cookie scoop, and we are just going to ball this up, and I'm going to place our dough onto a parchment-lined baking sheet. Of course, you can make these any size you want. If you want to go with the authentic Wookiee Ookies, then you could use a large cookie scoop. But like I said, those things were enormous. Not that I would judge you if you ate the giant cookie all to yourself. They are delicious. So if you're baking some of these up just as a simple double chocolate cookie, go ahead and get that oven preheating now. I'm going to give these balls that I've scooped out just a quick little roll in my hands just to get them into a nice ball shape. And we'll put these onto a parchment lined cookie sheet. I like to do about a dozen or so at a time. And when you are ready, we will bake these for 10 minutes. I like to keep these nice and soft, so make sure you don't over bake them. In you go, little buddies. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Well, hello, hello. Easy as that. Now we have some cookies to snack on while we make our deluxe cookies. Of course, you want to let these cool on a wire rack. This is one of my favorite things about baking on parchment paper is that there is never an issue with sticking. You can easily just slide the whole thing over to cool. But of course, there is the obligatory taste test while the cookies are still warm and fudgy. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it, right? And now we'll proceed with making the rest of our dough into our Wookiee Ookies. To do that, we will start by chopping up some pecans. So I'm using about 1 cup of pecans today. This whole recipe makes a total of about 3½ dozen cookies, but since we baked 1 dozen of them as our simple double chocolate cookies, this amount of pecans will be perfect for the remaining 2½ dozen. However, if you are doing this entire recipe as the Wookiee Ookies, I would up the pecans to maybe 1½ cups or so. Once our pecans are all chopped, I'll transfer them to a bowl. And now we are ready to make some cookies. So we'll take our portioned pieces of our cookie dough, again give it a little roll in your hands to make it a nice round ball, and we'll roll this into our pecans, helping to press them onto the dough gently. See? Just like that. Easy peasy. And of course, we'll repeat this for the rest of our dough. While we're doing this, I would love to hear from you. What is your favorite kind of cookie? Or is there a kind of cookie that you've always wanted to learn how to make? All right, and our Wookiee Ookiee dough balls are now complete. Now our final step in preparing our dough, we are going to help make that little well in the center of our cookie that our caramel will sit in. So I am using a ½ teaspoon here, and I'm just going to press it down gently into our cookie. Not all the way through, make sure you keep your cookie intact on the bottom. Now our final step before we get to bake these is going to be to chill the dough. You want to chill it for at least 1 hour. I often like to just leave mine overnight. Make sure you cover it up, pop it in the fridge until you're ready to bake them. Chilling the dough is just going to help us ensure that we maintain a nice thick cookie, which is going to give us a nice place to have that little pool of caramel in the center. So when your dough is nice and chilled and you're ready to bake, we're going to bake these the same way we did the simple double chocolate cookies at 350 degrees for 10 minutes. Now we'll pull them out of the oven when they're done baking, but before transferring them to a cooling rack this time, we're going to add one little step. We're going to grab a measuring spoon again and refresh those little pools that we made in the center of our cookies, since they puffed up a bit as they baked. So I have a 1 teaspoon measure here, and I'm just going to again gently press down, trying not to break the bottom of the cookie, just to give that caramel a nice little spot to nest. And then we'll slide it on over to the cooling rack and proceed with the rest of the cookies. Then we'll just let them be to cool down completely before filling them with our caramel. So for our caramel filling, we are keeping things easy peasy. We are going to use some Werther's Original soft caramels, and we're just going to be adding a splash of milk to them just to thin them out a touch. Some alternatives that I've seen are using some of the jarred caramel ice cream sauce, or of course you could always make your own homemade caramel. This is my speed right here. I like a shortcut sometimes, so this is the way we're doing it. If you have a favorite caramel sauce recipe though, leave it in the comments. So I'm using about 10 ounces of our caramels here, obviously unwrapping them, throwing them all into a bowl. And we will add to them about a half a tablespoon of milk. Now we'll just pop this in the microwave for 30 seconds. After our 30 seconds, we'll pull it out and give it a stir. You can see that it is still very thick. It's not even quite really stirrable yet. So we're going to give this just another 15 seconds in the microwave. Now you can see it's much softer. We can actually stir it. So this will be a good consistency for putting into our cookies. As you fill your cookies, if you find it gets too thick, just pop it back in the microwave for another 15 seconds. So I've got my 1 teaspoon measure again, and we're just going to fill that little pool in our cookies with some of this delicious warm caramel. So with this ratio of caramels to milk, this is going to give us a nice soft caramel filling, but it's not going to be liquidy. It's still going to have a little bit of a chew to it. I personally like it when the caramel is just thick enough where it has a chance to set up so it doesn't just drip all over the place when you bite into it. However, I will be honest, the Wookiee Ookies at Disneyland do have that thinner consistency to the caramel. So if you want a thinner caramel, you can just add a touch more milk if that is your preference. Now all that's left to do is just wait a touch longer to let that caramel set. I do recommend when storing your cookies to store them flat and even put a piece of wax paper in between each layer, just to make sure your cookies don't stick together and become a Wookiee Ookiee mess. And that's it. Thanks for joining me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this Wookiee Ookiee or double chocolate cookie recipe. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. Leave us a comment if you are excited to make these too. And if you want to see more of our Disneyland inspired recipes. And until next time, I hope you have an amazing day and happy home cooking.